I'm Alexa Burton, but you can call me Lexi, and I want to invite you to my fourth episode of Two Chairs and a Camera. And with me today, I have Neil Sater. Say hi to the audience.
Hello.
So why don't we start by tell us a bit about you and about your books.
Well, I've always been a fan of dark and creepy things. So first and foremost, that's
Dark and creepy is fun.
yeah, something I've always been into. Whether it's books, stories, movies, imagery, antiques.
Okay.
Let's face it, antiques can be.
Yeah,
creepy.
they can be.
And that's what I focus on in my writing. I've got 3 books out, and they're all supernatural mysteries.
All right.
Anything dark and creepy is what I like, and that's what I focus on. Now, my books, they wouldn't be considered hardcore horror because I stay away from gore and extremely disturbing stuff. And then I also try to give my stories an uplifting ending.
The gore has its audience, but it's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Like the slasher stuff is something that's
a lot of people like it. I shy away from it too.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got 3 books out.
I do, yeah. Just recently released my last one. So my
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So my first book is this is my debut book, and this is called Phantom Realm. It's a ghost story. It's about a haunted house, but what makes it different is it has this interesting time travel twist to it, which allowed me to give it a very cool surprise ending. And so that was Phantom Realm. My next one, this is Mercy, and Mercy is a little bit darker. It's more of a psychological horror story.
Okay.
It's about an elderly man, a retired farmer who lives in the middle of nowhere with his wife, and his wife is terminally ill, and as she declines in health and her state of mind, he starts to consider the idea of ending her suffering. And when he finally decides what he's going to do, that's when things really get crazy. So he finds himself in the middle of a very twisted mystery. So that's my second one.
And then this is the new one.
This is my new one, just recently released. And this one's different. It's inspired by true events.
Okay. And these are not.
They're not. They're just pure fiction. Now, all 3 they're all standalone stories, but I base them in a common area, and I call it Homer County.
Okay.
Homer County, Ohio, and it's a fictionalized county. It's kind of reflection of some of the counties that aren't far from here. Tuscarawas County, Coshocton County, and Holmes County. And these are areas that I travel to very regularly. I love the region. Beautiful countryside, nice people, interesting things, a lot of history. But when I travel there, I can't help but feel, being somebody who always lived in the city or suburbia, I can't help but feel kind of a certain mysteriousness to it. The isolation and the loneliness, and it's really powerful to me. So I try to build on that in my stories about this fictionalized county, Homer County. And so all 3 of my books are standalone, but they're kind of a little bit interrelated because they take place in the same region, so there's cross references to one another.
Interesting.
But this one, Atrocity, this is my latest, and this was inspired by true events. True events that took place in Tuscarawas County. And what happened was during the Revolutionary War, there was a massacre of Native Americans by American militiamen. What happened was in 1782, American militiamen went into the Northwest Territory, because Ohio was the Northwest Territory then, and they took captive a large number of Native people who were part of a Moravian Christian missionary settlement. And they falsely accused them of being spies and of attacking settlers, and they sentenced them to death. Really a tragic thing, and it was a very brutal thing. They bludgeoned them, they scalped them, they threw their bodies into a log house, and they burned it down. And so in total there was 96 people who were mostly women and children, by the way. So that's what inspired this story.
That was going to be one of the questions, is what inspired you to write this story?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in Ohio, but I never heard about this real life event.
So many things we just don't hear about, and that's such a shame.
And that thing in particular, I mean, a massacre a senseless massacre of almost 100 people, mostly women and children, by, militiamen. You'd think that we'd know about it. And so...
especially, like, if it's local.
Yeah, that's right. And, not far from where I live and grew up. And so I found out about it fairly recently. I read a nonfiction book about history along the Ohio River, and read about this thing and said, oh, geez, this is interesting. Never heard about this thing. So I started asking other people, have you ever heard about this? And pretty universally, people said, no, I never heard about this either.
Yeah.
So my wife and I drove down to this town. It's called Gnadenhutten. And we looked around a little bit. Now, I should mention the town is called Gnadenhutten, pronounced Gnadenhutten by the locals today. But back in the day when this missionary settlement was there during the Revolutionary War, that word is a German word, and it was pronounced, my understanding, it was pronounced something like Gnadenhutten. So I pronounce it like Gnadenhutten, like the locals.
I took German in high school. I'm trying to figure out what it might have been, but my German is
Huts of
very
Grace.
rusty.
Huts of Grace.
Okay.
Yeah, or grace huts or mercy huts. So we, and by the way, the locals typically call it Gnaden for short.
Okay.
So, but anyways, I'm going to pronounce it like the locals do today, Gnadenhutten. So we went down there, and there is a mass grave where the the remains of the massacred people were buried. It's right on the edge of the cemetery.
You hear about mass graves, but as somebody who has grown up in fairly suburban United States, you don't ever really think that it's possible that you're going to come across one.
Yeah.
Unless you go to, Europe or something.
Yeah, right. Well, there is a mass grave where the remains of the massacred people were buried. It's on the edge of the village cemetery today. Kind of grew up around there. And I'll tell you what, you stand there looking at this mass grave thinking about what happened. It just takes your breath away. Yeah. And I remember standing there thinking, well, why don't more people know about this? And I thought, well, if I can write a story about it, then maybe I can help raise the awareness a little bit. Now, my story is just totally fiction, but it's inspired by this event and the actual place. It takes place in a village called Moravian Village. So I change it, I fictionalize it. It's part of this Homer County, fictionalized county, and it's a village called Moravian Village instead of Gnadenhutten.
Where'd you come up with the name Moravian?
Moravian. Well, so these native people were part of a Moravian Christian mission.
So it's right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I set about writing this story last year. Really
came together quickly for you.
Yeah, well, it did. I kind of got stuck at some point, though.
Don't we all?
Yeah, we all do. But I felt like since the story involved, the actual event involved Native people, I felt it was important to include Native characters in the story. And I also wanted to include Native ceremonial practices, which, of course, I don't know anything about. Tried to research it, a lot of kind of conflicting information that I came across. So I didn't really know what to do. I kind of got stymied. I had written about 60% of the story, but I just didn't know where to take it and how it ended up. So I reached out to the president of the Junaid and Hutton Historical Society, Andy McMillan, and he put me in touch with a woman named Teresa Johnson. Teresa lives on a First Nations reserve in Ontario, Canada, so just across Lake Erie from where I am. And Teresa knew all about the massacre, but the interesting thing to me is that she was able to trace her lineage all the way back to the survivors of the massacre.
Wow.
Yeah, so this group, this Moravian mission settlement group, after the massacre, they moved around within what's now Ohio and what's now Michigan, and eventually settled in this community on the Thames River in southern Ontario. And that was about 10 years after the massacre happened. So this just blew my mind. Here's a woman who knows all about it, can trace her lineage, and so I really felt lucky when she agreed to act as an advisor and to share with me, details of ceremonial practices that are typical in their traditions. So.
That is awesome.
So after I started communicating with Teresa, she shared details for me that I was able to use in the story. I kind of weaved them in the story of details of traditional ceremonial practices. And within a very short period of time, so I had been kind of like stymied, but within a very short period of time, everything kind of came together, and I had my first draft of the book finished.
That's a fun moment.
It is, yeah. There's still a lot of work after that, but I asked Teresa if she would be willing to read it for to make sure that I was being accurate in my depictions of the ceremonial practices and culturally sensitive and things like that, and she agreed to do that. So I met her in person on March 8th. She came down for the annual, they call it a Day of Remembrance. It's a ceremonial event for the massacre, which happened on March 8th of 1782. And she came down, and she's actually been the organizer of this event in the past few years. So I traveled down there. My wife and I went down, and we met her in person. And this was the first time I had ever attended this event. My understanding is in the past there haven't been a whole lot of people that attended it, but that certainly wasn't the case this year. There was about 200 people there, I would say, and a lot of Native people who had traveled from across the U.S. and from Canada. And Teresa's community itself, and by the way, her community's name is called, there's a native language name for it that I can't reliably pronounce, so I'm not going to try here, but it's also historically referred to as the Delaware Nation at Moravian Town. Notice the Moravian name again, because the missionary settlement settled up there. And so this was a very moving experience for me, because I saw so many Native people had come in for this event to kind of memorialize what happened, including a lot of youth from her community who came down to learn about their ancestry.
That's good and interesting that the youth is taking interest, feels like the wrong word, respect.
Yeah,
for something like that.
And the community's trying to educate them on their ancestry. But it really struck me how awareness is low for so many of us.
Awareness, that's a great word.
Yeah, the awareness is low of what happened. And we should never forget something like this. But yet it's very much part of the consciousness of Native people even today. Here we are, 250 years, almost 250 years later. There were about 10 speakers at this event. They were all great. There was one in particular that caught my attention. A young woman named Cameron Whiteeye spoke, and she gave this very eloquent speech. And I asked her if she would allow me to print her speech in the back of the book. I felt like it would be a very kind of moving closure to it. And she agreed to do that.
A tribute almost.
Also, it kind of emphasizes her speech, the way she wrote it, kind of emphasizes the lasting impact of this event, you know, all these years later to Native people. So I felt very honored that she allowed me to print that. So so yeah, this is it was a wild journey for me. Very interesting experience. All really driven by the fact that this historical event is what inspired the story.
So we've got your inspiration. What was your favorite part of the book to write? Can you tell us that without giving away too many spoilers?
Well, I guess in general, let me explain kind of what the story's about, and then I'll answer that. So, the story is about a couple teenagers, Ohio teenagers, a boy and a girl named Sean and Heather, and they discover a pattern of killings that are taking place in close proximity of this.
And in comes the
mass
creepy.
grave. Yeah, here's the creepy part. And so they uncover this history of the village, and they start to suspect that what's happened is there's a vengeful spirit that was reawakened, and somebody, a massacre victim kind of reawakened as a vengeful spirit, and there's this new cycle of vengeance to make up for, to try to make up for what happened as retribution. And so, the story shows their ordeal as they try to figure out what to do about this thing, how to save the town from this vengeful threat. They eventually link up with the native characters that I mentioned. That I mentioned that I include native ceremonial practices in it. Well, there's some native characters that come in fairly late in the story, kind of the last third. And Teresa herself ended up becoming inspiration for the main native character.
What's the quote? Be careful what you say to me. You might end up in my book.
Yes, it's hard not to do as a writer. You can't really make those disassociate.
Yeah. And that's why there is a disclaimer in the beginning of all of our books in the copyrights.
Yep. These events are fictitious.
Yes.
So, going back to your question, well, what was one of the favorite parts of the story to write? I had a lot of fun with, that information that I got from Teresa, kind of building that into the story. So that was great. But also the very opening chapter, as a writer, you often fall back on things that you experienced in your past. And the opening chapter, I had an interesting experience with a buddy of mine in our early college days where we went out camping. And there was a very strange kind of, it's dark and there's nobody around, and very strange kind of malformed character comes out of the darkness and comes to our campfire.
I have read the beginning, and it's definitely, it hooks you in and just, this is wrong. It creeps into your soul and grabs hold of you.
Yeah, well, that was actually something that I experienced. It's obviously changed quite a bit.
Oh wow, that would be creepy.
Yeah, it was a strange thing that happened, and my buddy and I still laugh about it to this day.
Well, I'm glad it
Our
turned
outcomes
out
were not
better
quite,
for you than for presumably a few of the people in the book.
That's right.
So that was your favorite part to write. Were there any parts that were particularly hard, or that you didn't like writing, or that?
I wouldn't say there was any part that was hard, other than just the fact that I didn't have the information I needed to really figure out how to close the story. And it really, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't gotten help from Teresa. She was really instrumental.
So you're more of a planner in your writer than just see where things go.
Yes, that's absolutely true. You always do that to some degree. As you write, you have to. It forces you to work out details that you really hadn't planned.
You get somewhere and you intend to go this way, and the character's saying, "Nope, this isn't right."
That's right. Yeah, but on the spectrum of making it up as you go to planning and outlining, I tend to be more on the end of planning and outlining, and everybody's different. I got writer friends that are more this way, and writer friends.
Yeah, I'm more, and I've said this before. You make up the characters, you throw them in the deep end, and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely, and that works for certain people. I mean, Stephen King is notorious.
Oh, I've never read him. I know that sounds horrible, but I mean, it's the horror genre, and I said that's not me, so I've never read him.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I've read quite a bit by him, and he's famous as the term is pantser.
Yeah.
Because you write by the seat of your pants, and he basically sits down and makes it up as he goes, and it works really well for him.
Or I suppose this would be the motion for most people, not. Yeah. I'm the oddball. I write with a pen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I don't do that. I can't imagine that.
What makes it good is you don't have to turn on your computer and get into everything. If you've got an idea for 3 sentences or 1 paragraph, you've just got your notebook, you can jot it down and then get back to it.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I often will pull out my phone, I think of something, and I have a little note application that I put all the stuff in, and there are occasions where I go and look at that and say, what the heck was I thinking?
I think we all have those moments.
Absolutely.
So are you working on anything else?
Yes, actually I'm already working on my 4th book. Not very far into it. I've got less than 10,000 words.
Okay. Is it in the same
it's
location?
Same,
is what I was saying.
Same location,
okay.
Homer County, Ohio.
So this is your home base for writing.
That's right. For
okay.
now, I mean, it may not.
I read one author who created a community, I think in California, that they called Pine Cove. Leave a message in the comments if you know who I'm talking about. And I really hope they do more in there, but the last several books have not been Pine Cove.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's part of, being a writer. You create a world, and sometimes, that world is something that you can still use for other stories that take place, and that's kind of what I'm doing.
And it makes your world building easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that part of Ohio, to me, is something that I'm very familiar with. I've been traveling there since I was a kid, and that mysteriousness that I feel when I go there is really powerful, and I want to try to capture that and build on it.
Any tidbits you want to drop about the new book?
No, it's probably too early, because I got to get to the point where I'm comfortable that this is what's
gonna happen, and not.
Yeah, absolutely.
I gotcha.
So I'm just personally captivated by this historic event that inspired the story. I hope that if there's any viewers out there that haven't heard about it, I hope that they'll take the time to look into it. If you are into supernatural mysteries, I hope you'll check out my book. It's based on it, Atrocity, as well as my earlier books, Phantom Realm and Mercy.
I did have one more very important question that I like to close with.
Sure.
Tell us one fun fact, interesting tidbit about you that's not writing related.
Well, let's see. I don't know if it's particularly interesting. I am a grandfather. I've got two granddaughters, and we have a lot of fun.
You can give them a shout out if you feel.
Yep, Caroline and Rebecca. So yeah, I guess I'm not like trained education wise as a writer. I did take creative writing in high school, and I took business writing in college. But I'm actually my parents kind of steered me away from the creative side and wanted me to be an electrical engineer like my father. My father was an engineer at NASA, and so lo and behold, that's what I did. As I studied
at NASA, or just
at NASA, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the old Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, which is now Glenn Research Center.
Wow.
So yeah, he spent most of his time there, including back. He joined there long before the moon landing. So he was.
Now I'm kind of impressed that you didn't get into science fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but yeah, my parents wanted me to stay away from the creative stuff because it's tough to get a job and make a living at that. But they wanted me to be an electrical engineer, and that's what I ended up doing. So I studied electrical engineering, computer engineering. The first, 4 or 5 years of my career, I was working as an engineer, designing computers and things like that.
And then you transitioned over to writing.
Well, I always did it. I always had an interest in it, so I did it on the side. I got very serious about it about 5 years ago, and started to learn the craft and meet other writers and learn from them and read craft books and join.
Have you written all 3 of these in the last 5 years?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I should clarify. So Mercy was something that I wrote, like decades ago.
Okay.
And I rewrote it because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really understand it.
It took me 4 years to write my first novel.
Is that right? Okay, yeah. Well, when I got serious about writing, I actually decided to. I knew that I had a draft of, but I wasn't. I knew it wasn't like there.
It wasn't polished.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out how to, get it to where it needed to be. So I had the ideas for Phantom Realm, and so I put my energy into that, and I actually published that one first. And by the time I got done with this, I had ideas of what to do with it.
The book I published first was not the book I intended to publish first.
Oh yeah?
The book I will be publishing second is not the book I intended to publish first.
Ah.
I'm hoping the third one will be.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. You just kind of got to go with...
you go with what strikes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention or tell to the nice people out in YouTube world or Spotify world when I managed to figure that one out?
Yeah. So, and to close it out, I appreciate you inviting me here.
It was a pleasure to have you.
And, if any of your viewers are into supernatural mysteries, I hope they'll check my books out.
I will be linking all of Neil's books down in the description below, along with any kind of, do you have socials, author website?
Yeah, I'll
you send me anything and I'll get that all linked up so you can check out all his stuff.
Yes, and if you do check it out, thank you in advance. I really appreciate it. I write because I want to tell these stories, and I can't tell you what a joy it is when people read them.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Well, it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Lexi.
You're
appreciate the opportunity to come in and chat.
And if you all could give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it. But that's all I've got for today. So as always, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.